Hey everybody, welcome to the APP Academy. Again, Coach Dominic Catalano, joined by Head Pro Sarah Ansboury. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, glad to be here again.
Absolutely, we're gonna have a lot of fun today. What are we gonna go over today though?
Well, last time we were here, we talked about a third shot drop drive on a topspin ball. I think this time, let's talk about a slice. How do we create that slice on a third shot drop?
Well, that's gonna be a lot of fun. Guys, don't go far. We're gonna take a quick break, hear from our sponsors. We'll be right back on court with Sarah Ansboury. Guys, we're on court with Sarah Ansboury. She is going to go over, what are we going to go over today?
We're going to look at a slice, backhand third shot drop.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, the floor is yours, or the court is yours. What are we going to do?
It's where I like to be. So, we have a lot of questions about spin. I always have people say, how do I develop more spin? And let's be honest, spin is a natural thing that happens if you do things properly. And more often when people are trying to create like a chopping sensation, it just doesn't do a lot with the ball. So how you hit the ball is really important. Essentially, we're talking about two main factors that create spin. And number one, it's your contact point. It's the angle that your paddle is on contact. So for players who come from a racket sport like tennis or racquetball, it's a lot more natural for them when they're learning to hit a slice drop shot over your classic kind of a topspin, because it's a natural shorter backswing that's really comfortable. So what we're looking at is a couple of key factors. Number one, it's your take back. So what I see a lot of people do is they're pulling their paddle back and they're popping their elbow out. We don't want that elbow to be creating a chopping sensation. We want it to come from the hinge of your shoulder. So what you're doing when you're prepping your paddle, you're using your non-dominant hand. Like I say, the throat of the paddle is ideal. And kind of something you can think of is where the tip of the paddle is, you kind of want it up to your chin or to your ear. That's kind of a signal that you're looking. Now, if you go any farther than that, so if you can see this part of your paddle, it's just going to create like a pulling motion on the ball. What you want is a nice high to low motion. So your non-dominant hand, you can kind of see what my left arm is doing. It's creating a box out. So I'm using that elbow. I can kind of imagine I'm going to elbow somebody behind me. I want to really kind of create that space. I want to box it out. So when I'm doing this motion, now as you're shifting into that ball, now essentially you're kind of, I say buttering the bread, and what you're thinking of, like a lot of times the difference between ice cold butter on nice fresh bread, you don't want that. Like that's that, that's that chopping motion. You want nice warm butter on nice fresh bread. So it's a smooth follow through, and a lot of that motion actually comes from that non-dominant hand. You can kind of think of a table right here, and you're just brushing across the table and opening up your paddle.
And what does that do for you when you're separating with both hands?
So a lot of the motion on your backhand is actually your non-dominant hand for those who create that one-hander. What that does, it involves your shoulders. So when you're talking about net clearance, okay, most often when a ball goes into the net, it's because your shoulders are kind of tweaked like this, or your non-dominant hand is down here. So when you're creating coverage, what you're doing is you're extending through the ball, and what you want to think about is holding the ball on the paddle. So if you're kind of choppy like this, it's a very short range of motion. So this increases your range of motion and stabilizes. A lot of people think their non-dominant hand is just about balance. It's actually creating a job. And what you want to think about is think about your shoulder blades squeezing together so that when you're creating the motion, you're actually engaging your shoulders and feeling it right in your chest right there. Another important factor is transferring of the weight, because it's very easy to kind of get like stompy and punchy. So ideally what we want is kind of in a rhythm. Back foot is going to load your weight because we need that back leg, and then shift into our front leg, then push and pull. So what we're looking at, you always see that back toe drag, you know? You want that heel to kind of pop up, show the fence, the sole of your shoe, and that's telling you. So if you're kind of jumping, that weight's gonna pull you back, and you just want that nice smooth motion where you're actually pulling your body kind of higher so that your hips are getting underneath you.
And then what is that doing too? Because we talked about it before, that motion moving forward, and then what's happening with the motion moving forward and the paddle.
So everything in pickleball, we always talk about this, pressure. We always want to put pressure in a forward motion. So we're not chopping backwards, we're clearing the ball over the net, but we're also getting ourselves ready to keep transitioning to the net. Because ideally, what do we want out of that third shot drop? We want a pop up, we want a poach, we want something that we can attack. It's not just about, I got to get to that net.
Right, I want that offensive shot after I hit this great third shot.
I think that mentality of, oh, I hit the ball, now I get to go to the net, that's gone. We got to get rid of that mentality because there's this huge space, you know, this transition zone right here, this purple pretty right here, you know, that's the area that we get to attack. This is our acceleration. Essentially, when you have this room when we're going forward, well, now we can accelerate with our legs. We have room, whereas if we race into the net, we actually don't reap the rewards. We often like run into the ball. We aren't able to put as much pressure on our opponents. So we're really kind of gliding the ball. And even thinking like a low net clearance, you know, we want that ball like nice and steady. We don't want that big old looping ball like we've talked about before. You know, so when we're going through this, and a really important factor here is because I'm a tennis player and a lot of us come from racket sports. One of the key things that players tend to do is they tend to turn sideways. Well, if my hips are this direction, it's going to make that transition a little bit more difficult. So when you think about it, here's my net. So if you look at the direction of my toes, my first step is with my left foot as a right-hander. Then my toe is going to open. So now my hips and my toes are towards the net, so that when I'm opening up towards the court, I'm that much more ready to say, hey, my opponent sees that I'm here. I'm looking for that next ball.
You have one, a presence, and two, it's you not closing off where your hips are facing completely sideways. It's almost a 45-degree angle.
Absolutely.
So that after you make that transition to hit the ball and through the ball, now you're face up and you're like, okay, bring it. I'm here and I'm ready.
Absolutely. It's one of those big things that we look at when we're coming into this space, that ability to open the body so that we're ready to hit the next ball. Whereas if I were on a tennis court, I can hit that ball and I can wait 5 minutes for that ball to come back. I got all the time in the world, you know, but everything is a transition in pickleball. It's forward so that they see, our opponent sees our paddle right there and they're ready to, anything we give them, we're going to take advantage of what we can get.
Absolutely, and I love what you talk about is staying on the ball longer, right? And when you do that, that is a direct result of you staying through the ball and you being your weight transferring forward.
Absolutely.
When you're falling back, you're on and off the ball so fast. So that when their weight transfers forward, you're staying on that ball longer. And when you're on that ball longer, you have a much more better chance of success.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of times we think if you have a strings in a racket, those strings do a lot of that holding of the ball for you. Well, we don't have strings.
No, we don't
you know,
have
we got a plastic ball, it's
Yeah.
got holes in it. So we need to be the strings, which means we need to carry the ball on the paddle, much like putting in golf. If you think about that, you know, you really want to keep that club square to your hole, and it's a very rhythmic motion. You're not pulling or popping
You're
that
not
ball.
jabbing at it.
Absolutely, there's some phenomenal golfers in this sport for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
So sometimes people will think because their drop shot isn't bouncing in the kitchen that it's not a good ball, but it absolutely can be a good ball because it's more about where you're making contact. So you were taking those balls back at me, but you're bending over low, basically below your knees, which is what I call your red light zone. Now, if you're taking a ball in your red light zone, you got to be a pretty good player to be able to attack that ball. So again, it's that definition. The third shot drop isn't so black and white. I mean, that ball's probably bouncing behind your heels. So you have to, if you're going to play good defense, take that at least in the air. Otherwise, you have to step back, which both are probably going to give me good opportunities to take a ball that you may not do a lot with. Maybe it'll pop up for me, especially if I'm in your mid-transition zone. I'm looking down at you taking a ball in your feet, and one of those big signals, I'm looking if you're dipping your head. You know, if you dip your head down to look at that ball, I'm basically like, oh, I want that right here. I'm looking for that ball at my shoulders. So So again, it's that definition of a third shot drop. It's not about I got to get to the net. It's about putting pressure and creating opportunity for the player that is transitioning.
Sarah, again, thank you so much for being out here with us. We really appreciate everything that you bring to the table, all the knowledge, all the teaching. Thank you so much.
I love being here. It's always great to give a little more pickleball knowledge out there. As we like to say, we always like to see people getting better, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.